Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. I'm Craig. Joining me today is newly married Vince Travato. How are you doing, Vince?
I'm doing great, Craig. How are you?
Great. So, I want to congratulate Vince and Miss Alina Travato. Your fiance is now your wife, and congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I thought that maybe Chad or Scotty would get there first, but you know what? We did it. So yeah, we're all good. I think that you guys had some sort of bet on one of our episodes back in maybe June-ish or July-ish of 2022 as to whether or not Lena and I would officially get married before or after a Brewers World Championship. So we may want to go back and check the tapes, but I think it was probably June-ish of 2022.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, as Brewer fans know, the answer is, well, it's before.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be pretty close. Unfortunately, I was dead wrong on that. And I guess over the how many years now? Almost 20 years of Brew Review. I've been known to be a little bit pessimistic at times. However, this going into this postseason, if you watch or listen to our, let's just say, last podcast, I was pretty optimistic about the Brewers' chance. I thought that the stars were kind of aligned, and I kind of had a feeling how the MLB playoffs are going to play out. None of the real pillars of like New York Yankees or New York Mets and all this stuff. We're in the playoffs this year, and I thought it was time for some fresh blood. And obviously, I thought the Brewers had a good chance. Obviously, the Braves came in as the best team in baseball, but I had a feeling that the Phillies could knock them off. And if we were to get by the depleted Dodger, first of all, got past the wild card run, got past the depleted Dodgers in a 5-game series, that maybe we, could have a home field advantage with NLCS against the Phillies. All that would have played out, but instead we fell in 2 games in the wild card series to the Diamondbacks, unfortunately, and now they're in our place. And unfortunately, the Phillies look like a really strong team as well. So who knows how it would have played out? But I guess this Sunday before the last game of the season, this Sunday, obviously we found out we're playing the Diamondbacks. I was still very optimistic. Then 3 straight days of getting kicked in the teeth as a Brewer fan. First of all, Monday, I go on my lunch break from work. Already got my tickets in hand for game 1 of the wild card series. And all of a sudden, I get breaking news. Brandon Woodruff going to miss wild card series, most likely the playoffs. And now, as we find out, most likely all of 2024 season with a shoulder injury that was turned into shoulder surgery, which is a nightmare, unfortunately, for the Brewer fans. And then the next day, still jazzed up attending game 1 of the wild card series with my brother and my nephew, one of our number 1 listeners, Alex. And unfortunately, his very first playoff game, unfortunately, was a disappointment. As someone who really loathes Jesse Winker, he was pretty upset with Jesse Winker's late game at bat, thinking he was off the team about 4 months ago, that he made a sudden appearance out of nowhere to put up the worst at bat in the history of Major League Baseball, swinging and missing at the first 2 pitches, hurting his oblique on the second swing, going back up to the bat and swinging and missing a 3rd time. And so that was terrible.
It's like all you can do is laugh at this point. I don't understand the logic of including Jesse Winker on the postseason roster myself. It seemed like, even if he had been healthy for the past couple months, that's a questionable decision. I guess maybe you could make the argument, okay, left-handed power threat off the bench. But the fact that he had been injured and had not seen big league pitching for several months and just sort of been lingering around Nashville, I really do question some of the roster decisions that were made. And I would like a better explanation from the Brewers at some point, whether it be Matt Arnold or Craig Counsell. So we're going to have to utilize our press passes a little bit more and ask some of these questions. I think it just seems
as far as the left-handed power bat goes, I think he had 1 home run in the 3 months as a Brewer. So no, absolutely not.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. Totally agree. I don't understand the logic at all. And Owen Miller, I guess, has some utility, but it's not like he was really tearing things up in Nashville either. So some of the roster decisions going into the postseason were very questionable, in my opinion. And I don't fully understand kind of what was happening there. I know that, Rowdy was not swinging a hot bat either, but I certainly would have rather had Rowdy Tellez on the postseason roster than Jesse Winker myself.
I mean, as someone, it's almost like a slap on his face, or someone who put up a really good 2022 season for us. As a Brewer, I mean, I don't understand how Rowdy doesn't make that over Winker, but there was a bunch of questionable decisions. Unfortunately, it was almost like a carbon copy of Game 1 and Game 2 of that series at AmFam Field. We jumped out to an early lead with an ace pitcher on the mound, and Corbin Burns was great. But then the middle innings, they got to us with some. Obviously, Corbin Carroll is a ridiculously good player, and I'm starting to call him Ronald Acuna light because, I mean, as a rookie, put up 25 homers and 54 steals. That's ungodly stats for any player of any season of their career, let alone a rookie. And he was a thorn in our side during this 2-game series, obviously. But the rest of their lineup, Cattell Marte had I think homers in both games. And Alex Thomas had a homer in the second game, and Moreno had a homer. I mean, it was just, and then so once they took even a 1-run lead, as a Brewer fan, it felt like an insurmountable lead, which is ridiculous for a playoff team. I mean, you have to have some faith in your lineup to be able to score some runs, and myself, my brother, and my nephew had zero faith, and I think most of the Brewer fans sitting in our section and all the sections connected to ours had zero faith the Brewers could come back, and they did not. So it was a really terrible game, and of course, Devin Williams came in late in the ninth, the top of the ninth inning to try to hold a 1-run lead. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to do that. So Game 1 did not go well, and then Game 2 was almost like a carbon copy, where we jumped out to a 2-0 lead and got to Gallen real quick. And then Freddie Peralta had allowed no hits through 4 innings. So things were looking promising, thinking if we could force a third game of that series, with Wade Miley most likely on the mound, that'd be good things. But fortunately, they rallied in the middle innings. And then once they took the lead over us, it felt like, again, insurmountable, and that we had no chance. And that was exactly the case. And it's just a pathetic showing for the Brewers, and 3 straight days getting kicked in the teeth as a Brewer fan, and then sent home. So to say as a Brewer fan I was heartbroken is somewhat of an understatement, actually.
Yeah, I think that you and I probably disagreed a little bit on the trajectory of the team, although you were absolutely correct on the Braves getting knocked out by the Phillies in the first round. I didn't think that this team had the offense to really compete against Atlanta, who I had, said certainly was going to be the team that comes out of the National League. But there were so many holes in this team's offense going back to before the season. Really, it was just like some of these needs never got addressed. And then, as we discussed in our pre-production meeting, I thought that the guys that the Brewers brought in at the trade deadline were great pickups, Mark Canha and Carlos Santana, but I don't think it was enough. They were sort of, they took this approach like you couldn't really take on salary. And I think that one of the major takeaways that I've had over the past, I would say 2 or 3 seasons really with this front office, is that the Brewers have this incredible pitching staff, with Woodruff, Burns, and Peralta. You've got the best pitching staff, 1 to 5 probably in team history. You've got guys like Wade Miley, who literally would have been aces on Brewers teams of the past in the late 90s or the early 2000s. And we don't ever spend the money on hitting. And I know that not every answer is going to come through free agency, but imagine if the Brewers had a guy like Nick Castellanos in the lineup for Matt Olson, and they had targeted him intelligently in a trade. Imagine if we would have been able to take on some of these guys and you put a big power bat in that lineup that really solidifies things and gives protection to some of the other talented, bats that we do have in that lineup. So I understand that we're a smaller market. I understand that there's some constraints, but I really thought that there were some options available for the Brewers to look at, to kind of creatively look at ways to plug some of those gaps. And unfortunately, it seems like this piecemeal approach to roster construction continues to haunt the Brewers in the postseason. It's like, okay, we're good enough to get to the postseason, but we get overmatched quickly. And when you're talking about a short series against a good team, yes, the pitching is going to be probably the most important factor. When you've got Corbin Burns going, that's a really good thing. But again, if you don't have the offense to allow your fans to have some hope that once we're down by 2 runs, that we're going to be able to come back, that's a major problem. And you look at teams I was able to watch the Rangers Astros game last night. Both of those teams' offenses don't give up after getting down by even 4 runs. And, it's kind of interesting. I think that the perception of fans of other franchises is totally different when it comes to the offense. So I view this as a major systemic problem right now for the Brewers. And I do have a lot of hope and faith in some of the younger guys to come up and provide, some of that spark to the offense as we started to see this year with guys like Sal Frelick. Their maturity wasn't quite there yet this year to really, I think, get the most out of the talent levels of guys like Joey Weimer or even Sal Frelick. I think that those talent levels are going to continue to rise. But, you got to give them some veteran protection in there outside of just a piecemeal approach. And I think that means getting a big marquee name to sit in the middle of that lineup.
Yeah, I mean, so we just really should have identified the window of contention that we had last year and this year. I thought was the best part of our current window with our current regime. Obviously, everyone knows that Burns, Woodruff, and Adames, a pretty big core to the center of this team, are going to be free agents at the end of 2024. And so likelihood of all those guys going all the way to free agency is probably very unlikely. Possible, but unlikely. So you knew that they really had to try to go for it last year. What did we do last year? We traded Josh Hader at the deadline and kicked the can down the road for some reason, even though we were in first place at the time. What did we do this season at the deadline? We acquired some more bats, but they were very, and no offense to Carlos Santana or Mark Hanna and Josh Donaldson, but I mean, those guys are veterans that are kind of past their prime. Obviously, it's good to add one of those guys during a stretch run, but to add all those guys and expect them to be a core to bring some offense. I mean, we should have been more proactive when we entered our window and look at I guess we're just holding on to our prospects a little bit too much instead of trading them into an established bat, maybe even a controllable bat. Like, for instance, we should have been looking at our long-term future here. Obviously, Yelich long-term signed in the outfield, and we had Weimer, Frelick, Mitchell, and also Jackson Trio all coming up as future outfielders. We're going to have a crunch in the outfield and have to fix that very, very soon, actually. And so, and we're not even talking about guys like Tyrone Taylor who are still controllable. So, I mean, we should identify which one of those guys were most expendable and try to trade them for a more established bat, possibly at an infield corner, which, other guys have big boppers. Other contenders have big boppers at the corners, and we have not that. I mean, we've had a rotating carousel of bargain bin crap at first base and third base for a very long time, and it needed to stop, and we didn't put a stop to it. So, I mean, it is what it is. We basically reap what we sow as a front office, and that's that's what we did. So, unfortunately, our offense.
Yeah, I think that the last big real threat that we had at third base was Aramis Ramirez, who we signed as a free agent back in 2012. So we're talking over a decade ago, since we last got a huge bat at third base. And
same thing with first base. I think Prince left after 2020.
Yeah.
Prince left after 2011. So we've had a hole at third base and first base for basically over 10 years. That's ridiculous. I mean,
of at least one of the two. Yep.
And it's their philosophy, Arnold and Stearns, who came from Tampa Bay, that you can easily bargain fill the corner infield spots because there's plenty of those journeyman guys to grab. Well, that's fine. There's plenty of guys that have power, but then they can't hit. There's some guys that can hit, but then they don't have power. They're just not, you might be able to get them on the cheap, but they're just not quality major league players, period, and shouldn't be starting. And so that's the problem that we've had, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been a very frustrating postseason. And again, that's why I've really felt like the Brewers were not in a position to go far in this postseason. I think, again, you look back at the pitching, and that's obviously there. It's a matchup against any team in baseball. But, if you don't have that offense to take a short deficit and turn that into a win after the sixth inning, you can't really expect to go very far in the postseason, unfortunately. And it just seems like that the Brewers have continued to build for this, get to the postseason mentality. And I know it's been said by some of our colleagues and other media sources, but, it kind of reminds me of the Bucks of the, late 90s, early 2000s, up until they finally won a championship. But it kind of reminds me of the Bucks, where they would get into the playoffs most years and lose in the first round. And it's just because the talent level is simply not there. And that's the hard reality that it's tough to face as a Brewers fan right now.
Yeah, and I'm hoping now that you're right. Obviously, you were right, the fact that they didn't have the offense to go all the way this year. But most Brewer fans probably don't believe, and including myself, that we're going to complete the 2024 season with all of our free agents still in tow, so to speak. But I think that option still could be on the table. And maybe I'm hoping that you're right in that we have one more year of this window with this team, because now that Woody is going to miss most likely all of next year, or possibly at least almost all of it, if he can make it back by the September of next year, that'd still be awesome. But we can't trade him anymore. And so he may have pitched his last game as a Brewer, as sad as that is to say out loud. But because he's a free agent at the end of next year. So if he doesn't show that he's healthy, the Brewers cannot risk, as a smallest market team in baseball, giving him a contract that he's going to demand, even with the injury. So unfortunately, unless we can, work something out short term with him or something, that I think that he's as good as gone. Now with him injured, you really have to pause on, if you give away Burns before the start of 2024, you're really just punting the whole 2024 season at this point almost. So you have to really probably pause on doing that and hold them to at least the trade deadline. If you're in contention, then I guess you got to ride them to the end of the year. If you're not, you can consider trading with the trade deadline, I guess. Adames, I guess, is kind of a mixed bag. He's coming off a down season, so his value is going to be down. And if we keep him, he's going to have to rebound. We're going to be in the same boat, most likely. You might as well just hold on to him. One of the reasons I think we can be in position to do that, even though it seems stupid as a small market team, is the fact that we haven't emptied out our farm system over the last couple of years trying to quote unquote go for it. So in reality, I don't feel that we would have to restock our farm or anything, because we've kept all of our prospects anyway. So I guess because of that philosophy, I guess we might as well just ride them out to the free agency, offer them qualifying offer, and if they don't take it, take the pick. I guess that's not a terrible way of going about it. Most other GMs will probably think it's stupid, and fans, but maybe it's a way to go with the current setup. But we'll see how the offseason plays out. We won't get too much into that during this podcast, but in future ones we will. But as of right now, it's looking pretty grim, and unfortunate news that Brandon Woodruff has undergone shoulder surgery. And again, that's not like elbow surgery. It's not. There's a lot more question marks coming back from that. Some of those can be career threatening, and it's just sad. And you kind of had a feeling that Woody knew about that when he came out the Monday before the playoffs started, and it was like crying at a press conference, knowing that he was probably, definitely not coming back for any of the playoff run the Brewers might have had. Unfortunately, he didn't miss out on much. So.
Yeah, well, I know we are going to touch on this in future podcast episodes, but I actually firmly believe that the Brewers should hold on to Corbin Burns and Willy Adames instead of trading them going into the year at least. I do hope that the Brewers take the approach that 2024 could still be a big year despite Woodruff's injury, and maybe Woody is able to come back in later parts of the season, and he is able to contribute down the stretch still. If you're thinking optimistically, that could be an option, and you try to fill that gap. You do have some guys like Ashby who are coming back from injury next year that may be able to step up and be a bigger part of the rotation. You could sign a pitcher to a 1-year contract in kind of an all-in move and look to trade him at the deadline if it's not going to work out. So there are some options. I think that the first needs to be to address the offense. But again, we'll get into this in a later episode. I think this is sort of the postmortem here on the unfortunate ending to the 2023 season. But yeah, I do think that it would be unwise for the Brewers to completely punt on 2024. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Devin Williams is a free agent after the 2025 season, so we have to legit look at possibly of trading him next offseason. Obviously, for a small market team like us, it makes zero sense to try to, pay for a top line closer, which Devin Williams is going to be when he hits free agency. So you got to look at trading him before he's a free agent for sure. So I think maybe they have to, look at trading someone like Weimer and some other prospects to try to upgrade our offense this offseason, and in turn just go forward in 2024, take whatever picks you can get for the guys that become free agents next year, and then trade Devin Williams next offseason. And then basically, so maybe the window is not 100% shut, but it's 99% shut. And if the Brewers are going to go for it in 2024, then I think that's maybe something that's on the table. And then they can even have some hopes that Woody comes back come the end of next season, and that we still have the big three and Devin Williams and a better offense going into next playoffs. But there's so many variables. You don't know what other teams are going to improve. The Braves are still going to be awesome. The Phillies are obviously good. The teams in the NL Central are improving, all of them, besides maybe the Cardinals. And so it's not going to be a gimme division like it was this year. Going forward, it's going to be a dogfight to the end, and no spot in the postseason is going to be guaranteed for this team going forward. So,
well, that's for sure. And we still haven't talked about the need to address the actual offense. I mean, again, the issue, even with a healthy Woodruff and Burns and Peralta and Devin Williams still on the team, is still that we don't have an offense that can compete against some of the better teams in baseball, against the Phillies or the Braves of the world. So, I do think that the Brewers are going to have to seriously look at, what can happen in the offseason to bring in a bat, whether that's on a big one-year deal for somebody or some other strategy. I don't think that we can just simply say, oh, okay, well, Garrett Mitchell is going to be healthy all year, and that's going to be our big move. It's not good enough anymore. And I'm sorry, but I think that many fans are frustrated because the Brewers' mindset has simply been to kind of improve from within through healing of injuries, it seems like, in many ways. And I don't think that the team is good enough even with that. I think that the team needs some outside help.
No, I agree. And that's what I'm saying. Like, think about trading some of the, Joey Weimer or some, a major league ready bat or something like that we can part with. But the one, maybe a shot in the arm for the offense could be Jackson Trio next year. He's going to be 20, and maybe Sal Frelick has a breakthrough. Maybe Garrett Mitchell turns into an all-star. Obviously, Bryce Trang gives us some nice options at shortstop and second base. And,
by the way, Bryce Trang should have. By the way, Bryce Terang, not to interrupt you, Craig, but Bryce Terang, it's a travesty that he was not on the finalist list for Gold Glove at second base in the National League. Those lists were released yesterday, and our interns handed me the list, and I was like, this is ridiculous that Bryce Terang isn't even listed as a finalist for the award. I thought that he played outstanding defense. The fact that he's a rookie is amazing to me, considering the defense that he gave. The stability that he provided up the middle was just a huge boon to the Brewers and very underrated.
Yeah. I never get those lists. I mean, whenever they come out, there's always good, decent, obviously good gloved guys, but they always also have.
Well, talk to Scotty's intern. They're the ones that gave me the list, Craig. Scott's interns put those together.
Yeah, we're gonna have to fire some interns here, Scott. Yeah, pick up the slack. Yeah. But anyway, no, I mean, I don't get it either. So. All right, on to our next subject. I'm not sure if we're gonna have time for our third subject, was going to be the Brewers stadium financing issue, but because I think that's a lengthy discussion, and maybe we can say that one for the next podcast. But I do want to talk about Craig Counsell. Obviously, the season is over. He is not under contract. There's a whole bunch of speculation on what could be happening. The latest thing I read from John Hyman was the fact that Counsell is more than willing to stay in Milwaukee, but he wants to be compensated for it as much as he would as if he left. So I get the impression. I think the best paid manager in baseball only makes like $6.5 million a year, which is kind of ridiculous. I don't see why Mark Antanasio wouldn't be willing to match that. But I think Counsell made like $3 million this year or something in that range. There's just no reason in order to keep him to sign a contract that would pay him that much, because if Stearns or anyone on New York wants them, they're going to be more than willing to pay that salary. I mean, they're shelling out that to, backup outfielders or whatever. So, I mean, there's no reason that if Counsell, wants, and again, they might be outbid for him at this point because they didn't pony up the money. I think if Mark Antanasio would have been like, look, I'm going to make you the best paid manager in baseball if you stay in Milwaukee, here's a contract. At the time, rather than getting a bidding war, I think Counsell would have signed it. Why he didn't do that, I don't know. But now I'm to the point, and Mark Antanasio has been an owner long enough that the word cheapskate has to enter the conversation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So I do think that Craig, I'm going to predict that he either stays in Milwaukee or he retires. The only thing I could really see him leaving the Brewers for isn't just money. I know what our colleague John Heyman said, but I do think that he's probably got some not only organizational loyalty at this point, but he's got 2 houses in Wisconsin. His money goes a lot further in Wisconsin than it would in New York. He is comfortable with the organization. Clearly, he's been here for a number of years. He grew up a Brewers fan. So if he gets paid remotely fairly, I think he's going to stay if he wants to stay. I think that there is some truth to the fact that, he does have some other things in life to do besides just managing baseball games. I think that, you know, he's got two sons now who are playing Big Ten college baseball, one at Michigan and one in Minnesota, who do travel and, you know, are playing at a high enough level that it would probably be of interest to Craig to go watch them play as often as possible, certainly at that age. So that could be a very real consideration, and maybe he moves to a front office role for that reason. You know, so I don't know. I think that if anything, he's going to either do one of those two options. I think he either retires for family reasons, or he stays in Milwaukee and signs another, you know, maybe 1 or 2 year deal. I do think that the transition, if he were to leave, is going to be pretty seamless. I think it'll probably devolve to Pat Murphy at that point, and that Craig takes a front office role if he chooses not to manage. But, you know, first of all, the quality of life, I think for a guy like Craig, seems to be much stronger in a place like, you know, Wisconsin than New York. I think that, again, given his longstanding ties in the area, that he's probably going to want to stay if it's a remotely competitive offer from the Brewers. And even financial considerations, you know, the tax rate in New York is higher than it is in Wisconsin. There are things that, you know, do kind of play into it rather than just the pure numbers. So, you know,
I don't think the tax rate is going to, I mean, okay, for example, I think that if Mark Anthony says, okay, I'll pay you a 2-year contract, $5 million a year, New York comes along and says, we'll pay you $9 million for 4-year contract. I mean, that's a significant amount of money of a difference. That's 10 million total, over 36 million total. As much as the taxes, as much as the Milwaukee loyalty, whatever, money talks and BS walks when it comes down to these contracts. And we know this over time. Obviously, there's some loyalty, and we know he's got Brewer blood flowing through him. But he has won World Series with both the Marlins and the Diamondbacks as a player. And I think that he's more than comfortable going to wherever the money is. I don't think that that's the type of Craig Counsell that I know that's how he's going to act. But and that's why I'm saying I really been blaming this on Mark Antonaccio without really knowing what's going on behind the scenes. I think that if Counsell has offered a favorable contract extension before this, he would have signed it and he would be locked in. I don't think that he's going to retire. There's a possibility in my mind that he could take a 1 year off baseball, but the guy's a consummate baseball player, got baseball running through his blood, not just Milwaukee Brewer baseball, but like, I think he's going to manage for a very long time and be a good one. In fact, I think that he's got a good chance to win Manager of the Year this year. So
yeah, I do too. No, he should win Manager of the Year. I don't know. I do think that family is very important to him. We'll see. You know, I don't foresee him going to a different organization. So we'll see how that plays out. But I don't think that he's looking to kind of rock the boat in that way. I think that he'll want to get paid a fair amount, but it doesn't have to necessarily be the exact same amount. So I would be shocked personally if he goes to a different organization.
Yeah. Well, I think all Brewer fans will be shocked because I think that they're really bought in the narrative that, oh, no, he'll want to return. But I think that it still comes down to money. I mean, that's just the bottom line when it comes to business. If it's a significant amount of money offered to him somewhere else and a similar opportunity with a better chance of winning a World Series, why would he not take that? I mean,
yeah, I think for family reasons, to be honest. Yeah, I think for family reasons, to be honest. But that's, you know, again, we'll see what happens here in the offseason.
Any manager that's ever made a decision to take a job anywhere has had family decisions to think about, and that's a nice narrative. But ultimately, all these things, when player movement, manager movement, when jobs are offered and money is put on the table, when you're talking about the difference of millions upon millions of dollars, it's always the money that wins out in these situations. And I think, unfortunately, I feel after reading the John Hyman article that really, if he's offered a fair compensation, he'll stay in Milwaukee. If he's not, then he's more than willing to bolt elsewhere. That's where I think he's at. And I think the ball is in Mark Antonaccio's court right now, and I don't have faith that he's going to step up. And that's why I just threw out the word.
I will definitely agree with you that Mark Antonaccio has made choice after choice in the last few seasons that kind of indicates he's not willing to put an increased amount of revenue into the team, and he prides himself, I think, more on the corporate angles of the club rather than the competitive angles of the club. And you know, he's really kind of, I think he's capped the Brewers to a point on what we're able to do. You know, it's like we can't have it all at once, and if that's truly the point that we're at, that we really have to look at, you know, is Antonaccio the right owner for this team at this point, and who might emerge as a possible successor to Mark Antonaccio? Because I'm not really comfortable with the Brewers' approach at this point, whether it's at the deadline or whether it's in the off season or whether it's in some of their, even some of their more corporate angles. I am appreciative of all of the good things that have happened in Brewers baseball in the last, 15, 20 years since Mark Anastasio came into power. But I do think that there are some kind of holes emerging in some of the ways that things are done right now.
Well, as the owner of the team, there's nothing to really push him out. If he doesn't want to sell a team, he won't sell a team. Obviously, he's got a couple of younger boys. If it's his choice to pass that on eventually to his sons or whatnot, like a lot of owners of franchises and sports have done over the years, then that's maybe something he's looking to do. So he doesn't have to change his philosophy. He's not going to be, he can put as much pressure on him as fans as he wants, but he's going to do what he wants to the team. If the team is making money now, it's been an unbelievably good investment for him. I think he paid like $223 million to the Brewers, and now they're valued at over $1 billion less than 20 years later.
Right.
I'd say that's a pretty darn good return on investment, and that's only going to go up from there. So he's got the money. He could spend if he wants. If he really had a burning desire to win a championship for this city or for his organization, he could do that. He could start to, I mean, it's easier said than done to do that, but he could, put forth a better effort to do that. He doesn't strike me as someone who has a burning desire to win a championship like a lot of other franchise owners does. He seems like a smart businessman who likes to running the team almost as a hobby. And it's been a good investment for him as a businessman. And besides that, he'll do what he can do to stay competitive every year. But if he's going to do what it takes to put us over the edge to win a championship, I don't know that he's going to be willing to do that. He hasn't shown that as of right now. And he's had plenty of opportunity to do so. So unfortunately, I mean, even the Yelich signing was, he paid up for that. And obviously it looked bad from the get-go. I think it'll be fine. But even that was at somewhat of a discount for him. And I think it was just a smart business move to lock up a franchise player to, for jersey sales and put butts in seats.
To market that.
Yeah. So I mean, that just seemed like a wise business move, not necessarily a move to try to win a championship. So there are some other owners that are very vocal and spend a lot of money and don't really accomplish anything. So, I mean, it all just, it's not a formula that's going to necessarily win, but I think when we're in contention and we want to make a push to try to bring home a championship, those are the times where you've got to open up the purse strings a little bit more. And he hasn't really shown that he's been willing to do that so much over the last 6 years, with the Brewers making the playoffs in 5 of those and almost in the 6th year. So, I mean, I don't know what you can do. I mean, it is what it is. So we'll see how it goes going forward. But my opinion of Mark Antonassi, he seemed like a really down-to-earth guy. I just don't know that he probably doesn't. He doesn't seem to me strike me as someone who has a big ego with that down-to-earth style. Like, so to him, sometimes that ego can really drive things as an owner, and sometimes to be a good thing for someone who's trying to accomplish a goal of a championship. So in this instance, I think it's kind of just missing, which has some good traits, but also when it comes to the I really want to win and have this as on my mantle, so to speak, and do this for the city. I don't think he's fired up as he doesn't have that Brewer fandom running through his veins. I think he'd be fine just running a good business and getting a good return on his investment at some point.
Well, yeah, he's not from Milwaukee either, and that, again, that's not a complete critique. I guess George Steinbrenner wasn't from New York, but at the same time, it's sort of he's not immersed in the day to day. He still lives. I think he still has a house in Milwaukee, but he lives in New York. He lives in Los Angeles, and he's not necessarily bleeding for the city. I think that he, kind of comes in when he can, and it's sort of a hobby, and it's nice, and it's all great, but it really is just an investment at the end of the day. I think he chose the Brewers because the Brewers were available, not because he loved the Brewers and wanted to invest long term in the community. And I think that partially gets into the stadium debate, which I don't know that we've got time for today, which we could do on a different show here coming up. But I do think that you're onto something where, again, it's just a business. It's not necessarily going to be a passion. I think he does want to win, but it's not necessarily what drives his decisions. And I don't think he really gets involved a ton from the front office point of view either. I think that, perhaps the front office feels a little bit more limited because there's some number that's given in a budget that Anastasio may or may not even be privy to those conversations like on a daily basis. So I don't know, but it's and we're going to have to find out, as we can here through our press passes going forward. But I do think that we should probably ask our anonymous source, Tom Carter, about kind of some of the deliberations that are going on inside the Brewers this offseason, because it'll be really interesting to kind of see the approach both through ownership and through the personnel on the field going forward from Tom Kerr.
Yeah, again, TC and the information he provides isn't really anonymous. Like when we say his full name, I guess is what he tried to tell me. Send me a lot of emails, some of them angry, but anyway, our most of our interns, Scott's interns, are deleting those, I guess. So anyway, yeah, no, obviously a disappointing end to the 2023 Milwaukee Brewers season after, pretty successful run where we won the game with I'm sorry, not won the game, won the division kind of going away, so to speak. I think we really, in fact, I think the Brewers clinched the division sooner than any other team in franchise history. I think
interesting. I you know what? I'm not positive on that. We will post that on social media. We'll have Scott's interns do some research, and we will post that on social media for those who are listening to our show and expecting some follow-up. We will get that information out and see what the earliest clinching postseason date is in franchise history. It does deserve to be said, not to just be completely negative on this. The Brewers did make the postseason for the 9th time in franchise history, which is pretty exciting. So that does add to that, which is exciting and good. We just want to keep that momentum going forward. And it's, I think the question always becomes, how do you take the next step? And that is what I think this front office seems to be lacking, is the ability to know what to do to take the next step. And we'll see what happens. I think,
I mean,
some major decisions.
I do appreciate Scott's interns that we haven't fired yet, that they do some correcting of the stats that I sometimes make up, but I'm pretty sure, again, this is another one I'm kind of making up, but I think it's correct, is that the Brewers, since their 2018 run with this regime all the way to within the 7th game of the NLCS against the Dodgers, since then, the Brewers have made the postseason 4 other times, and in those 4 seasons, they are 1-8 in the playoffs.
Yep.
So that's
correct.
Pretty terrible. So that needs to be corrected moving forward, and hopefully 2024 is the year of the Milwaukee Brewers, but we shall see. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in.
Quick note here, Craig, before we close, I just wanted to give a RIP. 2 former Brewers actually passed away since our last taping, unfortunately. A member of the 1970 original Milwaukee Brewers and Seattle Pilots, Wayne Comer, an outfielder, passed away, as did former pitcher Jeff Paterick, who pitched for the Brewers in 1989. So unfortunate to note, but did want to mention that here on our podcast, since I know a lot of what we do talk about is Brewers history related, as well as the current team on the field. So did want to mention that.
My condolences to them. May them rest in peace. As a side note, did you acquire both their autographs before they passed, Vince?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I sent them both letters. Got one back from Wayne Comer back in 2018 when I started my project, and I was able to pick up a Jeff Paterick one on eBay back around the same time.
Okay, nice. All right, well, at least there's always eBay, so hopefully someone out there has these guys' autographs that you can collect it. But yeah, getting them firsthand from them, as they're, that's cooler than ever. So that's a really cool project. I'd love to see your collection someday. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, man. Sounds great. Well, let's do that. We are. The update is that I am down to, I think, 9 guys or something like that besides current players. So yeah, we're getting through it. The toughest one that I just knocked off was Hector Ramirez, a former pitcher for the Brewers. You may remember him. He pitched for parts of 2 seasons, 1999 and 2000, and sort of disappeared from baseball. But I did manage to find him and get him to sign a card. So that was a big one off the list.
Those are actually my first 2 years in the Milwaukee Brewers organization as well, as I started as the Milwaukee Brewers back in the 1999 spring training, and then worked 2000 at County Stadium. So, all right.
That's great.
Sounds good. All right. Well, stay classy, Wisconsin, and go Brewers.
Go Brewers. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Chad.